this meeting of the Ann Arbor Human Rights Commission. Welcome. I am going to officially call the meeting to order. We have a lot to cover tonight, so I'm going to jump right in. We'll start with roll call, please. Starting far to my right. Graydon, would you introduce yourself, please?
My name is Graydon Crapel. I'm one of the City Council representatives and liaison to the Human Rights Commission.
Corinne Moore, Human Rights Commissioner.
Linda Winkler, Commissioner.
David Baum, Commissioner and Vice Chair of the Commission. I will note that Leslie Stambaugh, the Chair, is absent this evening, which is why I'm sitting in this seat.
My name is Howard Lazarus. I'm City Administrator, and I am a guest at these proceedings this evening.
Rick Ratliff, Human Rights Commission.
Pamela Dent, Commissioner.
Vivian Jane, Commissioner.
Dwight Wilson, Human Rights Commissioner.
Sumi Kailasapati, Ann Arbor City Council, liaison to the Human Rights Commission.
Okay, very good. I made the logistical error of not bringing the list of people who signed up for public comment with me. Has anyone signed up for public comment this evening?
I signed up for my daughter. She's picking up somebody, so she's not here yet.
So she's not here yet. Right, okay, well, we will, when she arrives, we'll see if we're able to fit her in. What is your daughter's name?
Lori Saginaw.
Lori Saginaw, okay, very good. All right, there being no other people here to make public comment, I'll move down to discussion and approval of the agenda. Are there any amendments to the agenda? I have one amendment, a very small amendment to the agenda. It ends up really being more formalistic. In Section 5, under Old Business, I want to divide up the second bullet point, which is update on task force process and finalized questionnaire vote. I want a separate bullet point for update on task force process and list as a guest for that Howard Lazarus. And then the next bullet will be finalized questionnaire, parentheses, vote, close parentheses. And then the last bullet point will be tentative date for a special meeting. So just a very small change. Any discussion about that proposed amendment? Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Okay, so there's a motion and a second to approve the amendments to the agenda as just stated. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, the agenda is amended accordingly. All right, moving down to the next item, this section of our agenda, and I'm going to try to spell this out for our students here from Skyline High School. Thank you very much for being with us tonight. We didn't have extra copies of the agenda, so I'm going to say them out loud for everybody's benefit, but particularly theirs. We have some guest presentations and Q&A. Rick Ratliff, on behalf of the commission, has spearheaded organizing some invitations to speakers and organizations that we thought as commissioners it would be useful to hear from about their missions and to also inform the community through attendance at the meeting and through television about them. So tonight we're delighted to have with us Pam Kish, who is the Executive Director of the Fair Housing Center of Southeastern Michigan. I want to say, Pam, before you begin, Leslie Stambaugh, the chair, asked me to very explicitly thank you and the Fair Housing Center for your help on resolving a complaint filed with the commission last year. I won't get into the details, but Leslie said the help was very valuable, and so I just want to start by welcoming you and also thanking you and the center for your help on that. So, Pam, please.
I thought there were minutes or something.
That comes later.
Okay, gotcha. So yeah, I'm Pam Kish from the Fair Housing Center of Southeast and Mid-Michigan. Fair Housing Center is a private nonprofit organization. Linda's probably heard this 6 or 7 times now.
Happy to hear it.
Okay. And our job is to take complaints of illegal discrimination and to resolve those complaints. As you probably all know, it's illegal under federal law to discriminate on the basis of race, color, religion, national origin, sex, disability, and familial status. Familial status is a fancy word for families with children under the age of 18. And sex also includes sexual harassment. In Michigan, we have the Elliott-Larsen Civil Rights Act, covers most of what's, or probably all of what's under federal law, and it adds to that age and marital status. So being too young or too old, or married or unmarried. And then, of course, in the city of Ann Arbor, I don't need to tell you this, but sexual orientation, gender identity, legal source of income, student and non-student status, and maybe I've forgotten something. Anything I left off that you guys can?
There's a whole list.
Okay. We take about 160 complaints a year, and the most common complaints we get are based on physical disability, mental emotional disability, race, and families with kids. Fair housing law covers the rental, sale, and financing of housing. So getting a mortgage loan, obviously renting an apartment or a house, buying any kind of a property. And it also covers otherwise making housing unavailable. That might include someone who calls us and says, you know, I want to rent my house out to someone with a Section 8 voucher, and my insurance company is saying they'll take my coverage away if I do that. So that insurance company is otherwise making housing unavailable to someone in that situation. We try to make it as easy as possible. We have an office with 4 full-time people. We're covering 8 counties. We're in Washtenaw County. And we encourage anyone to call us. If you think that something is a housing discrimination problem or it might be a housing discrimination problem, please err on the side of calling us and talking to us about it. And call us first, because we'll have the opportunity to figure out if it's a fair housing issue and to do an investigation. Contacting other units of government, state or federal, may include contacting the owner immediately, and then that makes it impossible for us to really do a good investigation. We provide 3 services. The testing is the most unique service that we provide. That's what sets fair housing centers apart from government agencies like HUD or the Michigan Department of Civil Rights. And testing is a process where if we're testing for race, for instance, we would take an African American tester and a white tester, send them to the same property or the same mortgage lender within a few hours of each other. Everything about them would be the same. If we're testing for race discrimination, everything about the African American tester would just be a little bit better. A few more years on the job, higher income, a job that takes more education. So on paper, everything about the African American tester would be preferable. So if we see a difference in how people are treated in that situation, we know that race is a factor. So that's one thing that we do. And we have about 60 testers, all kinds of people in the community, mostly people who have full-time jobs and responsibilities, and something that they just do on an as-needed basis if we call on them. We also do investigations. So, and I'll show you some examples of this. Someone might call us and say, you know, I've been told that I can't live in my mother's subsidized senior living, you know, even though I take care of her because I'm under 62. Is that true? Like, they can really keep me out? And we will do the research involved in making sure the person knows, you know, are they keeping her out legally or illegally, and is there something else we can do? And then reasonable accommodations. When people have disabilities, most commonly they need something sort of extra. So in fair housing, we say treat everybody the same, but when it comes to disability, you have to bend the rules. So you might be an apartment complex that doesn't offer reserved parking. But if someone uses a wheelchair and they need a parking space directly in front of the front door of the apartment complex or the front door of their condo, whatever it is, that landlord is they're gonna, if they say no, they're gonna get a letter from us, and we are gonna say, you need to accommodate this person, even though this is not your general policy, and if you don't make the accommodation, we may have to take further action. And I'll tell you some stories about that. But those are the three things that we basically do. This is an example of testing. And it's kind of, yeah, I don't know, it's not, okay. So we sent out 2 testers on a race discrimination case at Camelot Apartments, kind of in between Ann Arbor and Ypsilanti. And what happened was the African-American tester, and again, I described the situation to you, was told to come back to look at an apartment when one was ready, and was told that a 2-bedroom apartment, uppers were $685, and didn't fill out a guest card. A guest card is when you go to an apartment complex and they say, what's your name, what's your address, what's your phone number, when do you want to move, you're looking for a 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, and it's just a record that you were there, and it lets them keep in contact with you and sell you the apartment, because that's their job, is to fill up their apartments. So within an hour or so, a white tester went to the same place and was shown 2 available apartments. She was told that there were lots of 1-bedrooms and 2-bedrooms available, and she filled out a guest card. So that's the kind of evidence, that's evidence to us of race discrimination. And we would repeat that process a few times to see if there's a pattern.
Can I ask, does that mean
Yes.
you would send additional testers to the same location?
Yes, yes, we'd repeat the process, So this is Nikia Holland, and she lived at Camelot Apartments, and she had a friend who also lived there, a white friend, and the white friend had an idea that something was going on, and she contacted us, and she encouraged Nikia Holland to contact us. So we had done those sets of tests based on their complaints, and that case eventually settled for $47,500. Investigations. Sexual harassment complaints, it's very hard to test. We're not going to send our testers into dangerous situations. Also, we find that landlords who sexually harass their tenants, they don't do it immediately. They wait until the person has moved in and they have the keys to their apartment, and they kind of test out, how far what they can get away with. So for a sexual harassment complaint, we often will take a complaint from one woman, and then we'll start to say, like, do you know who lived here before you did? What, have you ever heard anything else? Anyone else say to you, oh, I had that same landlord, and this is what happened to me? So we kind of put out our feelers. We have lots of sort of ways of finding out who this landlord may have come into contact with. And it's very rare to find a landlord who sexually harasses women doesn't just do it once. So it's pretty easy for us to find a group of people, and we meet with them individually, and we say, just write down everything that happened and let us know. And then we sort of look at all these things from women who, a lot of them don't know each other, have never heard of each other, and we start to see a pattern, and then we can sort of put together a case. So this is a group of women 20 years ago who answered this ad for, an elegant apartment in Ypsilanti, and that also went to litigation. Here's a reasonable accommodation. This is Darian. He has a disability. He's 3 years old, but he has the understanding of like an infant, really. They can't say to him no, or don't do that, or don't go in the street. So taking to a park was impossible. They lived in a mobile home park, and they said they wanted to build a fence around it. Not allowed. So we wrote a letter saying, you have to bend your rules, let them build a fence, and they let them build a nice fence. Once we have evidence on a case, or there's a refusal to make a reasonable accommodation, we offer people, they're in the driver's seat. We don't make these decisions. Linda comes to us, she has a fair housing complaint, we have evidence, and I say, Linda, what would you like to do? The Fair Housing Center could call and try to negotiate something, which almost never works. We can help you file a complaint with the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, or with the Michigan Department of Civil Rights, or we have a list of attorneys who take our cases on a contingency fee basis, mostly in federal court for litigation. So they decide and we put them through. Do I have another couple of minutes? I know I'm...
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, okay. Here's another case. This is race in public accommodations. This is Keck versus Kensington Court. This is a couple, African-American couple who wanted to have their wedding at this hotel. And they contacted us saying that they had gone there many times, tried to meet with someone, with the wedding consultant, tried to make an appointment, left their name and number. You know, this is like, we're ready to spend $12,000, but no one would call them back. They could never meet with the wedding consultant. So they called us and we tested it. We sent in white women and African-American women both going in to see if they could talk to somebody about having a wedding there. And we saw big differences in treatment of the testers, African-American testers and white testers, and then we used that to go into court. The judge in the federal court dismissed the case, and then it went to the Sixth Circuit, and the Sixth Circuit sided with us, and they also said that any business that behaves in a way that's contrary, what is a business for? It's to make money. So if you behave in a way that is contrary to what a business is, that in and of itself is a form of evidence that there's discrimination. Race pattern and practice. This is an Ann Arbor case. Ivanhoe Apartments is on Packard, across the street from the church synagogue. And we'd been getting complaints over the years, and we started testing, and we tested for race, and we had what I considered enough evidence to go forward with the case. And we, at that point, when there's a pattern and practice case where this looks like, you know, this has been part of what they do in a systematic way, we contacted the Justice Department, who joined the case with us. So, and here are just some really basic things about, you know, what we hear and we think, oh, that could be race discrimination. We don't very often hear blatant race discrimination. That may change. Things like, I just rented the last apartment, I lost your application, your credit isn't good. We've certainly had cases where they tell an African-American tester that, not a tester, potential renter, like, your credit's just not that good. And then they say, well, you know, I know somebody else, a white guy who lives here, I know his credit is terrible. So, you know, we know that that might sound like a real reason to say no to somebody, but it often isn't. You always have to compare it to somebody else. An agent that strings you along until you have to find another place to live. Oh, I lost this. I never got, your former landlord didn't get back to me. I never got this form signed. This covers employees who are have to resign or are fired for refusing to discriminate, and also racially motivated eviction. I moved into an apartment complex. Everything's fine. I'm white. And then I have a party, and landlord finds out that I have friends of all races and nationalities, and then they find a way to evict me. Disability, we only want working people. We don't take third-party payments. And we didn't make any of these up. Asking someone if they can live independently, telling someone we cater to students, you might not be happy here, we don't allow co-signers, and of course a refusal to make a reasonable accommodation. Yeah, a group home maybe would better suit you. Familial status, you know, we aren't set up for children. A brother and a sister can't share a bedroom. We say unless the landlord's tucking you in at night, he or she has no business telling you who sleeps where. We keep children on the first floor of the children's building. It isn't safe for children. If something isn't safe, fix it. We only allow these occupancy standards. We only allow one person per bedroom plus one, or in a giant apartment only allowing, you know, 2 people per bedroom. We cater to students. You wouldn't be happy here. And okay, this I just want to show you is a dot map. The blue dots is a per person dot. For every white person, there's a blue dot. Every African American person, a green dot. Red dots are, I can't even see this anymore. I think are it's Asian. Can someone see this?
Yeah, that's
Oh,
what
you
it
guys
says.
can't even see this. Okay. And so this is the kind of segregation we have in Ann Arbor and Ypsilanti. You can just, there's a visual of that. And that's our contact information. That's it. I'm
That's
happy
great.
to answer any questions or.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions?
Yeah, I would like to ask a question. Have you noticed in the past year, with the change in the sort of the national political climate, any upsurge in complaints?
Yes. Last year in 2017, we had more complaints than we'd had since 1995 or something.
Wow. And were they in any particular category?
It's still the sort of disability, race, familial status. Yeah. But I think people are hyper aware of their rights or their potential loss of their rights.
Yeah.
That's my theory.
Could you tell us which 4 counties you cover?
We cover Washtenaw County, Ingham County, Jackson County, Lenawee County, Livingston County, Monroe. Is that Jackson? I have a slide, but I think I left it out.
That's okay.
Yeah, so it's 8 counties, and you can
It's
vote.
8. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I'm sorry.
It's 8 counties. We started with 1, and then went to 4, and then to 8. So. And there's other fair housing centers around the state that we work closely with.
Go ahead, Linda.
No, I was just going to say, first, thank you so much for coming. You know, it's really striking how much what you do overlaps with our new responsibilities in taking complaints about discrimination in both housing and public accommodations as well as employment. And so that makes me think that when we get complaints like that, where it might be useful to have testing done before we were to go to the person against whom this complaint is coming in, it should go, in many cases, right to you as opposed to our following through on it. So it's definitely something for us to think about when we get these. It's really good that you're here to pique our awareness.
Yeah, no, we're happy to, happy to discuss any kind of case or how we might be able to work together. Yeah.
So I had a question. It sounds like you do rely a bit on volunteers, which is great.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit more about your staff? How is your office staffed, and do you have professional investigators? What is the breakdown of people on your staff, and what do they do?
We have 4 people who kind of do it all, I would say. I write the reports, I write the grants with help from other staff. We have an associate director, Kristen Kuran. She does all of our media stuff and all of our website stuff and a lot of our fundraising and events. And then we have a coordinator of investigation and an assistant coordinator of investigations. But we're talking all the time, and I might be a tester one day, if someone needs me to do that, and somebody else might edit a grant I write. It's all very. And then we have a part-time person who does the accounting.
I see.
And then we have a board of directors.
Do you ever contract out investigations? And so is that part of what volunteers do sometimes, or are the volunteers?
No,
just
I mean, we design the investigations in our office.
Yeah.
We make the assignments, and then we call, we have 60 trained people who we'd say, I need you to go out and play the mother of 4 who is,
Sure.
you and your husband want to buy this house. I need you to go out and pretend that you're a faculty person just moving to Ann Arbor, Right.
So the testing oftentimes is, gathering evidence that could lead to an investigation.
An investigation, the testing is the investigation.
Okay, all right.
So once we've done the investigation, and I'm the one who says, yeah, there's enough evidence, I have to say to myself, is there enough evidence to win this case in federal court? Yes or no? So if I think there's enough evidence to win this case, then I would meet with the person who's called us about the discrimination and say, we have enough evidence to support your theory that you were, the victim of discrimination. What would you like to do?
I see, and that was the slide where you have the different options.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I guess the only thing I'd also like to ask is, where do you see gaps in your mission? What are things you'd like to be able to accomplish that you're not able to do?
It would be nice to have more investigative staff, not the tester. I mean, we can always have testers. We have a lot of testers, but it'd be good to have more investigative staff. Yeah, I think that would be that would be kind of the main thing. It might be good to have an office in Lansing. It would be good to, for the fair housing centers around the state, having a central office in Lansing that could send cases, or do trainings or be kind of a central place would be good. You know, I can think of all kinds of crazy things.
How many fair housing centers are there like this across the state?
4.
Did you say where your funding comes from? Did I miss that?
We're funded like almost 80% from HUD.
Are there any upcoming benefits where people can come out and show support for the Fair Housing Center?
I'm glad you asked. We have a fair housing breakfast every year, and March 29th at 8:30 a.m., we are bringing Richard Rothstein to Ann Arbor. He's the author of The Color of Law. He writes about the history of government actions to create segregation. And it's a very interesting book, and he is a very interesting speaker. So, and it's a fundraiser for the Fair Housing Center. So we have tickets available. You can go to our website. Some of you, I think, have already signed up to come. I don't know.
Okay. I have one request, and it's this. If you're comfortable, would you mind sending me the PowerPoint presentation? And I'll be happy to disseminate it to the rest of the commissioners, just so that we can keep it as information
Sure.
for further use. Are you comfortable with that?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Thank you again so much
Thank
for
you.
coming, Pam. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for inviting me. Happy
All
to be
right.
here.
All right, so I'm going to move on to the next area of the agenda. Actually, the next bullet point on the agenda. I don't see Brad O'Hury here.
I just messaged him because I didn't see him either.
Yes.
And he had the wrong date. No one told him about the date change for February.
Okay. So he was going to come next Wednesday.
Yes, he would, yes.
Okay.
So we'll reschedule with him, and I'm
Yes.
sure.
Well, tell him that, the silver lining is he can really enjoy his Valentine's Day.
Absolutely.
Next Wednesday. And please, when you message him back, would you please apologize?
I will do.
On our behalf. And Leslie, I think, will probably reach out to him to
Yes.
reschedule.
Okay, will do.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. I actually tried to email him to confirm, and the only email address I could find was at Jim Toy Center, and I don't think that that's active for him anymore.
May not work anymore.
Yes, okay.
Very possible.
Yep, all right. All right. All right, so now we will move on to the next area of the agenda, which are some administrative issues. The first is a discussion of an approval of the January minutes. Do all the commissioners have a copy of the minutes from January? Yes. Okay. Are there any proposed corrections, changes?
I, as usual, have several. So the first is under, what is this, 2C?
Okay.
Under agenda, where it says implementation plan for a task force that will develop draft bylaws of. It's not actually bylaws. You know, bylaws are procedural, aren't they procedural?
I agree, they're not
procedures.
bylaws.
So I was going to substitute for a task force that will help design or something like that.
So this is under 2C, under the Howard Lazarus sentence?
Yes.
But is it important that we also use those exact language draft bylaws in the invitation that we made to everyone that's on our website?
You know, I think that was a mistake too, and we're not saying here that, so I was just trying to convey here what we were actually talking about. That bylaw should probably not have been used in the invitation either, but it was. So, either way.
Did I use the word by, did I?
I don't know, I don't know.
Gosh, I drafted that invitation, and I don't think I used the word bylaws.
I don't know, but that's.
But anyway,
yeah.
that will.
That was, it's not a big deal, but I just.
I like the language, will help design a community-based
Yeah.
commission.
Yeah.
What do people think of that?
And just delete bylaws.
Yeah.
And delete, yeah, so we would develop draft bylaws for and
Or.
replace that with help design.
Yes. And then in that same section, well, 2 dashes down from there, Leslie had put in a suggestion, which I think somehow got incorporated into the minutes, but it was a suggestion for the minutes. She was suggesting that all these sections that, toward the end that say not discussed, not discussed, not discussed, we actually agreed in amending the agenda to get rid of, to not discuss those things. So she's suggesting instead we write, let's see, all non-critical administrative issues on the agenda will be removed to allow for a deeper discussion of the task force implementation plan.
Yeah.
And then get rid of all of these things. What is this? Section 4B, C, D, and section 5C, and probably section 7. If that makes sense to everybody.
Everywhere where it says not
Yeah,
discussed.
well, pretty much everywhere.
Except for,
Yeah.
Police Oversight Committee Forum work session was discussed.
Well, yeah, and there I have the suggestion.
Oh, all right, well,
Go
actually,
ahead.
I just want to make sure, I want to
Yeah,
make sure that I'm
yeah.
looking at what you're proposing here.
Plus, yeah.
4B, C, and D.
And then 5C and 7.
And 7,
Yeah.
okay. All right, Linda?
And then under 5B,
Mhm.
we did discuss it, but we sort of discussed it earlier when Mr. Lazarus was, when we were having the discussion with Mr. Lazarus and the people here. I would propose under that section writing something like, in light of discussion with City Administrator Lazarus at tonight's meeting, no additional forum will be planned, or something like that. Because I think that's what we decided.
Does anybody else have any comment about that or recollection of that?
Can you say it again?
Sure. In light of tonight's discussion with Mr. Lazarus, in light of discussion with Mr. Lazarus at tonight's meeting, no additional forum will be planned.
Yeah.
I think that's what we.
All right.
Yeah.
No additional forum.
And then last but not least, under the resolution, hate incidents in Ann Arbor resolution, I think it should spell out the name of the resolution and say that it was unanimously passed. So it should.
What
say-
section? I'm
Sorry, 5A.
5A, okay. So substitute, under the category, state title of resolution and note that it passed.
So instead of just resolution,
Right.
it should say resolution condemning hate crimes and reconvening the Ann Arbor Community Response Group was unanimously passed, period. And then it gets attached to the minutes, hopefully.
Insert.
Yeah.
Bear with me, I'm writing
Oh,
here.
thank you.
Was unanimously passed, okay. Any other proposed changes?
On page 2, I think, where it links to the Human Rights Commission page, there should be a dash between city and clerk in the link. It's a broken link otherwise.
Okay, so, I'm sorry, Vivian, which paragraph I didn't hear?
On page 2, it's the
Yeah.
link to the website. The paragraph that's just the link.
Oh, under the link?
Yes.
And so city clerk, the hyphen should be removed.
The hyphen should be in there. There is no hyphen there. I don't see a hyphen in my copy.
It is here.
Is there? Okay. What's that?
Okay. Is that where we both look at the same, the link
Yeah.
right at the bottom of that section? Okay. Good, the dash is, I see the dash there in my copy, so I'm going to leave it. Any other proposed changes? All right, do I have a motion?
I move to approve the minutes as proposed, amended by Linda and you, anyone else who may have proposed changes to the minutes.
As amended? Okay, or as proposed to be amended? Okay.
Yes.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
All right.
All opposed? Okay. With special thanks to Commissioner Winkler,
No problem.
the minutes are approved as amended. All right. Next, communications update. Linda and Vivian, anything to report or say?
No.
Not really. I did notice that communications for the city has further improved our little web page by putting the subtitles up on top, so you can click on, you can see what all the subtitles are on the first page that comes up, and you can click on any of them to see the pages further down, and that's useful. The other thing I realize is that we need to make a note to get this resolution on the webpage, the one that we just
The one that was
passed.
just passed? Okay.
So I wonder if, Heather, if you're listening to this, when you listen to this tape, if you can mark this as unanimously passed on January 10th and include it on the top of the resolution section on our page.
Great.
Yeah.
For purposes of your class, Heather Koch is the city's administrative liaison who works with us. And so we are asking her, she's going to watch this later presumably, and she will add the resolution to the Human Rights Commission website. Okay. Excellent. Anything else under communications?
Just a comment, and that is,
Sure.
can we include the actual website in our communications so that all who may want to go to our website don't have to Google it or search for it? Make sure it's inclusive in our minutes or in our agenda, so that, especially for the students, because I've noticed that we often will have different visitors from month to month. And so if we would, just as a matter of being, I know we're going to learn to hate this word, but we're going to use it anyway, being transparent and communicative, that we make it user-friendly and easy for anyone to find our website and access that more readily if we include it as part of our minutes and in our agenda.
Yeah, that's good. And also for the students' sake, I know you were looking for an agenda. It occurred to me you can find it, I think, on Legistar, if you haven't already looked. Okay, sure.
That's great. I don't know if that's something that we really need to vote on. Is this,
No.
is that something else we can ask Heather to do since she's the person?
Yeah.
All right. So I am making a note that we are hereby requesting Heather to do that. All right. Excellent. Anything else? Very good. Status of complaints. Pam?
There are no new ones, either on the HRC email or phone, but I do have an update to one that is still being determined. This dates back to last year, where we received a complaint from an individual alleging discrimination and being denied service based on disability. And I did an on-site at the location of the respondent and learned that that location had undergone a renovation. The complaining party was denied service. The person is unable to utilize the services because of the disability. And in some respects, it speaks to the configuration of the location. It doesn't lend itself to this individual being able to transition into the premises and be served.
This is a salon,
This is a
Yes.
nail salon.
yes.
Yes. And so the person, the complaining party is in a wheelchair and cannot transition from that wheelchair into the salon's, I don't know what to call it, other than the chair. Interestingly enough, when the complaint came in, I had some concerns that I've since learned additional information, which I'm happy to share. I'll be brief in doing so. After speaking with the salon owner and the complaining party, I contacted the Michigan Department of Civil Rights because I wanted to be clear to all parties of what does govern, especially when there is the allegation that there is unlawful discrimination transpiring. The Michigan Department of Civil Rights raised some issues that will probably factor into the outcome of this particular complaint. And so that's still being determined. So I don't have a definitive answer yet. I hope to have that ideally by the end of this month. But the questions that had not occurred to me that were raised by the Michigan Department of Civil Rights are the layout of the salon doesn't lend itself to assisting individuals who are wheelchair bound. It's just the way that that particular location is configured. The individual cannot transition, as I said before, from the wheelchair into the salon chair in order to be served. And that's really the crux of the complaint. There wasn't a deliberate outright refusal to serve the individual. It was in respects predicated on the fact that the individual couldn't transition and then just the way that the location is configured. So in speaking with the Department of Civil Rights, they indicated if in fact the owner of the salon could not accommodate the complaining party for either health reasons or safety reasons or building code reasons, then the complaint will end. But if there is anything in either of those three areas where the salon owner could, then it could be that the complaining party establishes merit with the complaint and a determination could be made in that person's favor. So what's being determined now is what's the outcome of those three areas: safety, building, or liability.
And is the commission making that determination?
No, the commission, because the commission has, the Michigan Department of Civil Rights has
Yes.
said that.
That's what I meant.
Yes,
Yeah, I'm sorry.
that if any of those three governs, then that information will be communicated to the complaining party. And in the course of looking into this concern, because it is a public accommodations concern, it is a state, it falls under the purview of the state. EEOC does not have jurisdiction to address public accommodation complaints. So it would fall under the jurisdiction of the Michigan Department of Civil Rights if it appears to have merit.
So will they be sending someone out?
No, what they will do is they will send the complaint to the complaining party. That person then has to have it notarized, and that's what gives them jurisdiction to look further into it. On their own, they can certainly make a determination by making a quick phone call and say, you know, does the location meet the building code requirements, even though it doesn't lend itself to serving a person in a wheelchair? Interestingly enough, this particular location recently underwent a renovation and received, you know, certification that it met the codes, building codes. So, but in the course of the conversation with the Michigan Department of Civil Rights, they indicated that suppose it's not a person who's in a wheelchair, suppose it's a child who wants to have a pedicure, but their legs aren't long enough to put them in the chair, do they get to refuse to serve them? or if it's any other person who presents with a disability and they can't transition from whatever mechanism they may be in to successfully be served. The other thing that they proposed was, can the owner on their own obtain other equipment that might allow clients to be served so that they can remain in their wheelchair or whatever that they present with. So they're looking at all of that.
Thanks, Mayor.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your excellent work and for that report. I'll say for the students' benefit that we very deliberately don't say the names of the institutions or the people who are involved in this to respect their privacy, but you got a pretty good rundown of the facts there, so I hope that that's useful to you. All right. Pam, anything else under status of complaints?
Not at this time, no.
Okay. All right, moving on to the next section of the agenda, old business. And we'll start with a report from our city council liaisons about any business that they would like to share with us. And I guess what I'll say is the rest of this old business section all has to do with the task force process, or the process for establishing or selecting people for the task force. And so to the extent that you want to include in your report anything related to this at this time, that would be great and might provide a very nice segue into the rest of our discussion. Of course, feel welcome to share other matters as well as you see fit. But I wanted to make sure that I pointed that out. Yeah.
Thank you. You wanted me to segue into the task force issue in terms of who should be in the task force. There was discussion regarding, as you might have watched on Monday, it was finally determined that city staff would not be part of the voting membership of it, and some couple of council members raised the issue, would that be discriminatory? And I don't think so, because, for example, a city employee can't run for city council. I mean, that's prohibited. It's just the nature of it, right? Because let's say Mr. Lazarus is there, he is the boss of any employee, and let's say that employee is really disgruntled with the way the task force is running, you have a conflict of position because
Sure.
you're a paid employee and then you're in the task force. So anyway, that was determined. So no city employee is going to be a voting member, but like, for example, Mr. Postmaster staff might be there to advise us on how to do investigation or whatever, but they won't be voting members. So that's one. But I think what came out with the public hearings and the discussion is that you really, especially the public hearing, when you talk about diversity, because that's usually thrown out, right? You want a diverse group of people or diverse opinions. It was very clearly made, you don't really want to bring in people who don't have any problems with the police, because that's not part of diversity, because you really want to make sure people who have issues or underrepresented or people who feel their voices aren't heard are the ones who should be in the task force, because it's to resolve their issues. Because sometimes diversity usually means, so you should bring in people who don't have problems and who have problems, because if you bring in people who don't have any issues. So I guess it's basically looking into power differentials. That's how it
Looking
came
into,
out.
I'm sorry?
Power differentials, people who feel like they are marginalized, they should be represented in this commission. That was clearly articulated by many people who came and spoke. So I think that's what, for me, even the task force, to make sure people who can bring a diverse perspective and opinions from groups that feel like, whether it is incarcerated individuals who are released, or trans students. I mean, there was one student who said that she was transgender, or African American. So we just we have to be really cognizant, because it's not a monolithic group, that there has to be like, because one council member raised the issue of, oh, we need more police in schools, and it was rightly pointed out by one resident. I mean, certain minority group students don't want police with guns inside schools. So I think we really need to be, I think that's going to be the next task, to be very cognizant of these disparate issues, to make sure they are well represented in the task force, so that the end product reflects the concerns of our community, which is marginalized. Thank you.
Anything else, even beyond the task force report from City Council as far as you're concerned?
My concern was, I personally feel that the City Council was timid in setting the resolution. Councilmember Jack Eaton and I brought in amendments, and for example, there was one amendment regarding, there was the resolution said basically we need to set up procedures and mechanisms where we take complaints and pass it to the Ann Arbor Police Department as soon as possible. So for us, having an oversight body which just takes complaints and passing it on to the Ann Arbor Police Department, this is for Jack Eaton and me, what's the point? Why even have? So we brought an amendment asking that be struck down and saying that whatever information you need to pass on, you pass on, but we have the powers to have an independent investigation when it requires. That didn't go through, because the final version there was an amendment to the amendment that went through, basically said we set up procedures to take complaints. And I felt very disappointed that we were just so timid when the community and our discussions were very clear about when the need arises that we should have investigative power. So we need to make sure when we are, because they said, oh, let the task force determine that. So it was kind of, we put a period, we set up mechanisms to receive complaints, period. So let the task force determine what do we do. So I think that would be an issue. For me personally, I think as a commission, what we have discussed in the last 3 years is that when does it warrant? So for example, we are not going to be doing obstruction of justice. It's not like when data comes in, there is a minor involved and some discrimination or whatever is happening. It's not like we are going to keep that information. I mean, we will pass it on to proper authorities. So, but at the same time, when is it meaningful for us to have a parallel track investigation, not just a residual, basically looking at the police department's investigation and just rubber stamping it? So
it strikes me as an issue that the task force, the potential for very robust discussion.
Absolutely. For me, that would be if the composition of the task force is done well, I think that would be the #1 issue, because everything else is pretty much straightforward, right? We want to evaluate policies, we want to look at procedures, we want to see how de-escalation can happen, I mean, all that is, I think, not controversial. At least in Ann Arbor, none of that is controversial. Right now, the sticking point is this very point that if a resident is not happy or is unsatisfied with the, police department's internal investigation, do they have another place to go to or not? That is the point. That is the crucial point we are all at. And let's see what this city can do for that question, okay? That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Graydon.
Yeah, well, just to hit on that point too, I remind the board that the HRC's report that was provided did say that the investigation, there's a difference between investigation and review. Investigations would be conducted by the police internal audit Internal Affairs Division with review that can be done by the HRC or the commission being established. And there were a number of issues that having that language in that proposal, in the resolution, caused problems. Things need to be discussed and worked out, and that's one of the purposes for the task force, is to help determine what's the charter, what's the guidelines for the commission and how it will operate, and what will it be at boundaries and those types of things. It is important to note that it was a unanimous vote by council to support the task force, the creation of the task force and the resolution, and for Mr. Lazarus and staff to go forward, to come back and say, you know, how things are going to go, which he will hit on here in just a few minutes.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else?
No.
All right. Thank you. Great. And thank you again, Sumi. All right. So moving on to the next point, and in fact, I need to pull out my amended. This is the part of the agenda that got amended. So next, we want to talk about. We would like to have an update on the task force process for general discussion by the commission, but starting off with an update from Mr. Lazarus, the city administrator.
Thank you. As council members College Sapathy and Crapel indicated, there was an item on Monday's council agenda that, after much discussion by council, council passed a resolution providing some guidance and direction on the formation of a task force. Before I get into that, I'd just like to follow up briefly the personal note, the comments that our council members made. You know, I don't very often get the chance to say that I'm proud of our municipal council, but in this case, I do want to say that. They took an issue that had high passions. They took a little less than 3 hours, went through that, the draft resolution and the amendment word by word, understanding that words have meaning, and set a model for how we can deliberate professionally and respectfully, and in the end come together and pass a resolution. So they're to be commended for that, and it was a good, overall good experience, although at times it did seem a little bit, it did take a good bit of time. The resolution, I provided a copy along with a memorandum that I forwarded where Mr. Baum gave me some questions, which I provided some answers to. Essentially, the resolution describes a process for nominating members for the task force, and then it also sets a scope of work for the task force to look at. The first requirement within the resolution is to return a list of nominees, and generally I think a work plan for what the task force will do by the council's second meeting in March. And that, I think, lines up very well with the Human Rights Commission's process that you put in place to seek interested parties and have a special call meeting the last week in February to review those names. The way the council decided that would be handled is that the names that you receive, as well as any others that I receive from council or other sources, will come back before the Human Rights Commission, and you'll make a recommendation on it. I know that there have been a lot of concerns over independence and perhaps even censorship, but you know, the council is very direct that they want the Human Rights Commission's recommendations there. My role is to help assemble forward those. My hope always is that we can do this as a collaborative process and return a task force membership that is reflective of the various interests in the community and those who have participated. We then will, after we will then proceed after the council approves that, you know, the mayor points and the council confirms, we'll work on the scope, roles, and responsibilities for the task force. That will include not only having the very in-depth discussions over what legally can be put into a review commission with help from and guidance from the city attorney, but we'll also address all the other areas that Ms. Sapathy mentioned. We'll also address the process for recruitment of commission members, and with the council, there'll be the issue of selecting a chair. That will be returned to council with the target date of September 8th. So there is sufficient time to have the deep discussions that we need to have. Also would point out that part of council's deliberations was not to be overly prescriptive to the task force, so that the task force had the opportunity to go a little bit in-depth, and as well as having breadth in what they look at. Those sessions, we'll put those together. There'll be a schedule. I think it's important before members are committed to serve on the task force, they do have an understanding of the time commitment. So what I will put together and forward for discussion is sort of a schedule and different topics for different sessions. And I think, as I said, I responded to the small number of questions that I received this afternoon in the memorandum I've provided. I'm certainly willing to discuss anything else that are on the commissioners' minds.
Discussion. Vivian.
I still have some questions about exactly how task force members are going to be chosen. So we've received nominations, and so do we vote on it ourselves and then pass you our recommendations that then get passed to city council? Like, what exactly happens? We're working with you, but what does that actually look like?
Well, the council's direction is that, to the city administrator, is to solicit volunteers with input from the Human Rights Commission, the Neutral Zone, and other appropriate community stakeholders to serve on the task force. It says that members of the task force shall be Ann Arbor residents, and service on the task force neither ensures nor precludes service on the commission. Employees, as Ms. Calcipopi said, employees of the city of Ann Arbor will not be eligible to serve as voting members on the task force. I do want to point out that city employees do serve as ex officio or non-voting members on several of the city's commissions. The most recent formation of the Transportation Commission has several members who are city employees, and by having them included, it ensures that that particular commission has the expertise presence at every meeting to help guide and provide technical input, but not to direct the discussion that that commission makes. But to get back to your question, it says that I will provide names of potential members of the task force to the HRC for your review and recommendation, and I'll return those to the mayor for his nomination. So there was concern expressed last time we met about either a veto power or the ability to, my ability to determine who's going to be on the commission. That is not the case. As I said, I would hope that this process is collaborative, and while I can't posit or articulate what kind of things would be of concern, I would hope that through that discussion we have we do have some consensus. But even if there isn't, my role in this is to return to the council the commission's recommendations.
So, other questions, yeah? Does that answer your question?
So, for example, we have, so there are 11 spots to be filled. For example, we give you 11 names that we like, and you said that you have serious problems about 2 of them. Would you forward the entire slate of 11 that we've chosen with your 2 concerns? Would you take those 2 names off? Like, what?
I would forward the commission's recommendations, and if I had concerns, I would mention them, but I would not. The council is very, very clear that I would forward the commission's recommendations.
I think one thing we may want to consider, and we'll get into this, I think, when we get to our meeting where we're actually choosing nominees, is we may want to consider going above 11. We may want to consider, a group of 14 or 15. There might be people who ultimately end up deciding not to serve, or and we just might want to have a little bit of flexibility. I think if we recommend 11, we're in danger of dropping below 11 ultimately.
So what you're saying is 11 plus 2 or 3 alternates?
I guess it's for us to decide how we do that. Do we do, here are our first 11, and then here are 3 other possibilities as alternates, or here's a slate of 14, and we're not going to rank them? You choose. I think we get to decide that, as we go through the process of choosing how we want to present this to Mr. Lazarus. And then ultimately, which will ultimately get presented to the commission. I'm not prejudging anything. I'm just saying this is an issue that we're going to want to talk about. It sounds to me like what I am hearing is that Mr. Lazarus is comfortable with us taking the 30 names that we have, and I guess I should make that clear. We have, to this point, we received a bunch of self-nominations, people who said they're definitely interested in being considered for a position on the task force, and so nominated themselves. Several other people who were nominated by others who we then, some commissioners confirmed with them that they would be interested in serving. That total number right now stands at 30 people, I think, which is I think a very good, healthy number. I think that what we need also to do is to make sure that we get from Mr. Lazarus and the mayor any names that may have been submitted to them. My understanding is that there was, while we were collecting our names through our process, there were some people who went to the mayor and Mr. Lazarus. We'd want to get those names and make sure they were part of the mix, and then proceed as we were planning to proceed, which is to send out a follow-up questionnaire to all of the interested applicants, asking them for more information, and then once we had the pool of people who had returned the questionnaire, then go ahead and make decisions from that group and then recommend it to Mr. Lazarus. Does that, what do people think about that just as a starting point? Yes?
I just want to be very clear, though. It is your recommendation that goes to council. My role in this is administrative in nature based on what council passed. I, again, address the concerns that were raised last time we met, and council addressed those with greater clarity in the resolution that they passed.
No, that's not correct.
You don't
No,
agree?
just a correction on that. Ultimately, the resolution that will go to the council about the 11 members of the task force will be the 11 that are nominated by the mayor. But the point is, in addition to that, they will get the whole, if you recommend more, that your full recommendation will be passed on along to the council.
Yeah.
So when the council confirms, they can do that. But the initial resolution that will have 11 names on it will be those 11 nominated by the mayor.
Which is to say that the mayor has veto power, is that right?
The mayor has the ability to, as it states, the task force shall consist of 11 voting members nominated by the mayor from among interested persons, including those referred through or recommended by the Human Rights Commission, the neutral zone, or other stakeholders. And so whether it's veto power or not, the mayor is going to appoint these 11 people after he receives your recommendation.
I mean, not appoint, propose them to
Yes.
the council.
Yes.
Right?
Right.
And what I also hear being said here is that if we decide that we want to put 14 people forward, or we put 11 people forward and whatever 11 the mayor submits, if they happen to be different from ours, one way or another, what we put forward to the mayor is also ultimately going to get passed along to city council for their consideration. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, because the process is when there's a resolution that is put forward, once the council goes to the confirmation, the council certainly has the ability to, like they usually do, that they can make amendments. They can make amendments or additions or whatever. And so that certainly is part of the process, but the initial nomination will be from the mayor.
I appreciate city attorney's clarification, and I think we're consistent in what we're saying. I am not going to screen out any of your recommendations. I think that was a concern that was raised last time. But certainly, as Mr. Postma says, it is up to the mayor and council to appoint and confirm the members of the commission. They have, they have the ability and right to substitute names and put names in that they receive.
Right.
I think to the best that we can, they'll provide those to me, and I'll bring them back to this commission.
And to the commissioner's question, it's not a veto power, sir, because the HRC's recommendations are recommendations.
Right.
And so in that sense, it's not a veto.
I don't know, my reading of this indicates that you, as the city administrator, will collect the names solicited from everyone, including names solicited by the mayor, names received by the mayor, and all of the names go to us. That's my reading of this language. So is it your understanding that you will see the names that the mayor has received and that those will come to us as well?
It is my understanding, but I think, as Mr. Postma said, the mayor and council have the ability to add, modify, or change. But as we prepare for the meeting date that you said, I will certainly do efforts to make sure I have the complete universe of people who have expressed interest.
Okay, so there's a distinction here that I want to clarify. What we want to be able to do as a commission is we want to be able to look at all of the names that have been put forward, either through our solicitation process, or names that have come through the mayor to Mr. Lazarus, and I think even city council. It would be great to have all of those names so that we could then run the next part of our internal process to be able to make the best recommendations, send our recommendations to wherever it needs to be sent. It sounds like it's going to go to the mayor, and then what will happen is the mayor will consider those. He'll make his recommendations, but also our original recommendations, along with the mayor's, will not be kept from council. It will go to council as well, so that council will see what our full recommendations were. Does that address your concern?
I am reading the language
Yeah.
on page 2
Okay.
of the resolution, the very top paragraph.
Uh-huh.
The city administrator will provide the names of potential members of the task force to the HRC for review and recommendation. It says potential members of the task force. It's not.
It also says, the second part says.
I understand that the mayor ultimately
No, but it
provides
says,
the
and the
list.
commission's recommendations will accompany the mayor's nominations, which makes me think there's a second set of potential candidates that could come from the mayor, not through us. And so, and then my follow-up question there is, we had the February 5th deadline. Does that mean people who haven't already applied can send their name to Mr. Lazarus or the mayor? The people going to the mayor, we may or may not see those names. They may be a separate, the language, I know it was hastily put together during the meeting, but as I read it, it says two different things.
It doesn't have to, is all
Well,
I'm saying.
well,
It
we all
doesn't
need
have
to be on the same page. I
Right,
don't know if the
absolutely.
mayor's on the same page.
My requirement
That's
for
the
this
thing.
resolution is to bring the names that I have in hand at the time you have your meeting to discuss and make your recommendations, so that you can consider all of those that have been forwarded.
But we will have already sent a questionnaire to our people. How would we need to be able to do apples to
Right,
apples
so what I am
before the.
asking, so what I'm asking
yeah.
along those lines is,
Yeah.
I would really like to, as soon as possible, receive from the mayor and from you and from city council, if there have been named council people, if there are names that have been presented to them, I want them added to our list of 30. Some of them may be the same people, I'm not sure. But what we would like to be able to do is run a consistent process
Absolutely.
on the commission with all people who want to be considered, so that we can make the most informed recommendation possible.
You speak my mind.
Yeah, pardon?
You speak my mind.
Okay.
Yeah, and also, it's kind of really hard if we are, for the average city council member, let's say there's 34 names. 30 have recommendations following from, because a lot of city council members really trust the members here and their judgment, knowing that you guys have a background on this issue. So it'll be really, again, apples to apples comparison won't be there. If there are 30 members who have recommendations from Human Rights Commission, and then there are 4 of them, their resumes are there, but no context, no recommendations. So I think this came up when we were speaking on Monday, because Mayor said, I believe, if you can look back on the tape, that he had received 2. He wasn't sure whether you guys got the same thing or not. Maybe they sent it to the mayor and to you. He said that he had 2, and that it would be passed through Mr. Lazarus. So I'm hoping
Okay.
that Mr. Lazarus would pass it on to you soon, so that when you have a pool of, let's say, 32 right now, you look at 32 in the same way.
All in the same way, using the same
Exactly,
process, yes.
Exactly.
So do you have any difficulty with that, Mr. Lazarus?
I do not.
Okay.
And the only other thing is, I think that when you pass on the recommendations, I think that ultimately for the mayor, he will probably want, although I don't speak for him, he will probably want all of the ones that you have considered, and then here's the packet that we looked through, and here, these are our 11 or our 14 recommendations, and that would be a process that would be consistent with what is down here.
And if you look at the second paragraph under the first resolve, it does direct that I prepare a resolution for council by the March 19th. Preparation of that resolution will include backup and background as necessary to help council make an informed decision.
So are we going to encourage, so I've already gotten some requests from people who haven't met the February 5th deadline, and I wasn't sure what to tell them.
That's your deadline from this commission.
Yeah.
Stephen?
Yes. So, I suppose that if we wanted, as a commission, to extend the deadline of our own process, that's something that we should talk about and probably decide together as a commission. I don't feel like, I certainly don't feel like I can unilaterally make that decision.
I would add a couple other, maybe some advice. One is taking the time to review 30 resumes is a time-consuming process. I think it's appropriate to ask for some advice about how to do that in a way that's compliant with open public meetings. But I don't know that it's reasonable that you're going to sit down at 7 o'clock at night and do that within a 2-hour time frame either. So maybe we can provide some advice on how that process could work, and I can send that with the consent of the attorney to the commission as well.
We'd be glad to receive any advice you wish to provide.
One of the items, my understanding, that you want to do this evening too is select a date to finalize your recommendations. I appreciate the February 26th date.
It was just for the week of February 26th. I want to make that clear.
And I just, again, the decision is up to the commission. But that date does give adequate time to work through the process as well as prepare the resolution for council. I would, again, as I put in the responses to questions, 26th is a good date with the warning that it's currently reserved for a council work session, which I think council is not going to need, but I just want to make you aware of that as well.
So that the 26th itself might not be the best date, but we were, and we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves on the agenda, but we were, as I spoke with Leslie Stambaugh about this before this meeting, she seemed to think that the week of February 26th was a good, that would give us time to get questionnaires out, questionnaires back, time to review the questionnaires, and be ready, hope maybe with some advice about how to manage this process efficiently from Mr. Lazarus and the city attorney, and or other appropriate people, that we could finish that process. What I want to suggest is if we are going to extend our own date.
Well, and I think that will make sending out the questionnaire, getting it back in time in order to meet at the end of February very difficult. But maybe it's okay, maybe it's enough to say, if people contact Mr. Lazarus or the mayor within the next week or so, and they send us the few names, that we will try to include them in our process and, do the best we can, rather than formally extending the deadline. I don't know.
Other thoughts on that? Pam?
Thoughts and questions.
Sure.
So hardly know where to begin. Let me start with where I have a question. Of the number 11, where it says voting, there had been previous discussion that persons from the HRC and the 2 city council members would comprise this task force. Are those 4 individuals, 2 from HRC and 2 from city council, inclusive in that number of 11? Or are they in addition to?
The way the resolution is written is that there are 11 voting members. Those include 1 chairperson and 1 youth member. It doesn't speak specifically about reserving members from the HRC. The 2 non-voting city council members are in addition, I think, to that number of 11.
Correct.
So, of the commission, would they be considered voting members of the task force?
I think he just said non-voting.
No, he
No, no,
said,
no,
he said
no,
council.
City
I said
Oh,
that,
He
no,
said
I
city
think,
council. I'm
Oh,
asking
the
about the
city council. I
Human
thought he-
Rights Commission.
Oh,
I
thought he
think
said
they
human
would be,
rights.
and there is a parallel that on other city commissions, there's cross-pollination with other commissions, and those members are also voting members. Good example would be there is a member of the Energy Commission on the Environmental Commission, and he is a voting member.
So of
No.
that total number,
I think it would be theoretical for you, as a commission, you could name one of these 11 people to be a member of your own commission if you wanted. But if they were not named that way, they would be a non-voting member if there's no prohibition on that in setting it up.
I agree with that.
Yeah,
But if you want them to serve as voting members, you'd have to nominate them as voting members.
that's right.
And my comment was there's no preclusion from serving as a
That's right.
voting member on more than 1 commission.
understood. I think we're getting further afield than what I had intended. I just want a total number.
So then-
11 voting members, I think,
11
period, right?
11 voting members.
Right, but
Okay, and of the 11, 2 are HRC.
Well, it doesn't say
No,
that
it
in the
doesn't say
resolution. I
that.
think
It doesn't
that's
say
up
that.
to
That's
us
up to
about
us.
whether or not we want to nominate
Okay.
X number of HR commissioners.
And we can also reserve the right to have two that are non-voting.
Okay, I understand
I'm
that.
not-
I guess it would factor into, once we do our review of the applicants, the number that we put forth and say, but in addition to this 11, you have 2 non-voting or voting HRC, and then you have, in addition to that, 2 city council members, so that the ultimate task force either is 15 or it's 13. Or it's 11. Yeah, so I'm just trying to get clarification on that. The
So-
other thing is, I thought that once we received all of the applications for the task force, that would actually fall under this commission going into what they call closed session because of the nature of the content of what we're discussing. Am I correct in that or no?
Can you speak to that, Mr. Pope?
Yes, I can. Commissioner, I think what you're referring to is perhaps taking all 30 or so into closed session to winnow it down to a certain number. Yes, that would not be allowed under, in closed session. That process would have to be done in open session. There's no provision under the Open Meetings Act, the way that we've had this set up, to go and do that.
So when city council goes in closed session to talk about employment-related things, that's not a parallel?
It's not a parallel. In fact, what we've done in the past, for example, on selections, they can go in to narrow it down in a certain way, but only if those individuals have applied with the specific provision that their application be held confidential. And so you might have a situation where someone applies for the city administrator's position and they're at another location. And certainly in winnowing it down from, say, 12 to the finalists, but then than the 4 or 5 finalists, it's always public. And frankly, it's a risk for people who are employed when they do that, when they're 1 in 5. And people say, well, why are you interested in leaving? And so that's how it's set up. But in this situation, that's not been done. And this is a much different situation. So I think there are other ways to winnow it down, and I'm happy to talk to you about that. But I do not see going into closed session to do it. It's contrary to the Open Meeting Act.
I want to go back to Pam's second to last question, which is this. The resolution is silent as to whether or not there can be other non-voting members besides 2 city council members. And so I want to put a point on Pam's question. In your view, does the resolution leave room for us to decide to recommend X number of human rights commissioners to be non-voting members above and beyond the 11?
I actually don't see that in this. That would be certainly something that could be brought forward to the council and could be brought forth in the resolution. And I think that the issue would be for this task force is that by adding the 2 non-voting city, the task force also includes 2 non-voting city council members. They may be 2 new members of the council who are not sitting in this commission, but that's something that certainly could come back to the council through resolution. But I think you are right. This doesn't provide for any non-voting member to become from the Human Rights Commission. That's right.
Okay. So the way I see it then, Pam, is that we'd be running a little bit of a risk. If we want to nominate a Human Rights Commission member or 2 to this task force, then they should be part of the 11. If we don't want to do that, but we hope that somebody can be a non-voting member, it sounds like that's a recommendation we can make, but then it will be up to City Council to determine whether or not to allow some non-voting or non-voting members from the Human Rights Commission.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
I think it would take an additional confirmation by the council. It's certainly not in here and not something that was particularly discussed at the meeting on Monday night.
Okay.
I would also just caution about the task force becoming unmanageable in number.
Right. Yeah, there's a difference between 11, 13, and 15, for sure.
That's my question.
Yeah.
So one final comment and then question, or question and then comment. I spoke with Chairperson Stampod a couple weeks back, and this speaks to those who applied or were in the process of applying, or at least expressing interest in being considered for the task force. The instructions were such that all potential applicants were asked to submit their credentials in whatever form, their interest, either through the HRC. But I raised the question with her, suppose they didn't, and now that I'm hearing that there may be potential other applicants that are coming from other avenues, and she's going to check, but I asked if perhaps maybe there weren't some individuals who hadn't actually mailed in something, and I know that our mail comes through the city clerk. But I just want to ensure that anyone who has wanted to be considered, we have received that information. And then I echo the sentiments that have previously been expressed, that at some point we need to establish a date where this is it, because we need to get busy with the next step. And I don't want to unduly prolong that process, because it then pushes it back even further. So my concern is, as you've indicated, David, that we have everything that we need when we start our review, so that we are consistent in whatever we do, and then we can move forward more timely.
So I will say to that, Pam, in my own view, and I don't know how others feel, I'm perfectly comfortable leaving February 5th as the deadline that has come and gone for our process. I would also say that any person who submitted who expressed interest to the mayor or a council person, or possibly your office, Howard, or who has mailed something in and is sitting there, you know, in a mailbox somewhere in the city, by that date, or postmarked by that date, that's fine with me too. I think that should be the pool. I don't think that we should extend it again, because I'm worried about time. I don't know how others feel.
I agree with you. I just found an email. I left for India on the 18th, and I'm not sure whether you got this or not. So I'm forwarding it, but it was dated January 18th. But that would be considered part of the pool,
Sure, it
right?
would be timely.
Yeah, so that's why I'm going through my email box right now to make sure that I had forwarded every application that came into my mailbox.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is anybody not comfortable with that, with what I have just proposed?
I just think we have to get the mayor on board with that too, since I assume nominations are coming to him too.
If this may set your mind at ease, I've only gotten one person outside the HRC process, and I believe he also applied through the process.
Okay.
The only other contact I've had is I did reach out to the neutral zone once council put that into the resolution, and got one student name from that process. So I think the notice you put out on your Facebook page, as well as the
Email.
the item that was put on the city's webpage, identify the HRC process. The item on the city's webpage does also, as it appropriately should, tell people they can contact their elected officials, but I haven't gotten anything forwarded to me from that process. So I think,
Do you know if the mayor has, it sounds like maybe the mayor has received any, do you know?
I don't,
whether or not-
I don't,
He said two. Didn't he say two at the council table?
he may have,
Yeah.
I think, but I'll follow up with Mayor Taylor.
Thank you.
I think those are certainly going to be exceptions to the general rule,
That's
and
fine.
not something that's going to upset the apple cart.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I will say this, what I have learned in my years, my years as a professional in various contexts is, the only time that, or one of the clearest ways to get in trouble is when you don't follow your own rules. And we set a process with a deadline of February 5th, and I would like to honor that so that people do not say, well, wait a minute, there are some people who came in who didn't express interest by the 5th. That would be a problem. So that is part of what is motivating my opinion in this regard. So
But
take
are
that
we
for-
not waiting on the mayors?
Yeah, but the mayor, I assume that the mayor has received these names by the 5th. I mean, yesterday was the 6th, today is the 7th. I suppose it's conceivable.
But if you're talking about what we have received, we have not received the mayors, have we?
We haven't, but, no, we don't have the names. I guess, let me be clear what I mean, Dwight. Assuming that the names have made it to the mayor by February 5th, if it isn't, I suppose we have an issue, and we could talk about that. And it sounds, Howard, like you've received the information you received.
I will reach out to mayor and council members
Okay.
first thing in the morning.
Okay.
And ask that they forward any names that they have to me.
That's fine.
And I will relay the concerns that you have raised this evening.
Okay. Are people satisfied with that?
Yeah, that we get them tomorrow morning, by tomorrow morning?
I
Yeah.
will reach out to mayor and council tomorrow morning and ask that they forward any interest they've received, and I will relay your concerns to them.
Thank
And if you could ask, for a
Thank
response
you.
as soon as possible so that we can move forward with our process, that would be really helpful.
I will do that.
Thank you. Other comments about this, about task force process? We're going to.
If I could
Yes,
raise
of
one more
course.
point, because last time with the large audience that was present, there was concern about having city staff in the room. And as with all commissions and task forces, and maybe the most recent task force was the one that was put together to make recommendations on zoning as it relates to marijuana laws. It's always important to have the appropriate staff in the room to provide guidance, not to censor, not to direct, but to ensure that as the commission or the task force makes its recommendations, that it understands the boundaries that are there. And that's not a censorship, but certainly our joint responsibilities to get something to council that they can actually adopt and approve. So I am very much aware and sensitive to the concerns about who is in the room, but this going forward is a collaborative process. So as the council indicates in item 3 under the first resolved clause, it is very helpful to have someone from the finance department there, because we want to make sure that if there are any other requirements that are needed, council likes to consider those as part of its normal budget process and not do it off-cycle. It's important to have a representative from the city attorney's office, particularly with the most sensitive issue, as Councilmember Kalasapathy brought up, to ensure that the processes are legal and appropriate. And then this is a collaborative process in the end when we talk about the other parts of the responsibility of the commission, to have a representative of the police department there as well. So that is for advice, it is for technical expertise, and it is for guidance, but it is not setting direction, except that if, the commission does need to be aware of the boundaries that are legally established on the process. So I just want to be upfront about that is part of this process, so that conversation can occur. But council, I think, has addressed your concerns in that those staff members are not voting members of either the task force or the commission.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I appreciate that clarification. Personally, I don't mind who's in the room. What I do mind is who is giving leadership. And if they're not voting and if they're not facilitating, then I'm easy with it.
There's going to be a chair of the task force who is a voting member, and I expect that chair will be running the task force.
I do too, but that's why I said I appreciate the clarification, so.
So,
Sue me then, Vivian.
Okay, since we are talking about the task force, my suggestion would be to have at least 2 of the members who worked on the report, who have been integral part of this whole police oversight issue from beginning to now, should be part of the list of pool that I think personally that you submit as voting members, just because they have
From the Human Rights Commission.
Yes. Because of so much accumulated knowledge and reading and research. I mean, literally, you guys are like endowed chairs of this topic. I mean, and more than anything else, you'll be a good resource too. So I think for institutional memory and continuation, and you have listened to all the recommendation that has come from numerous public hearings we had, the whole process. So that's my personal wish, to see that at least 2 of you are there on the list that we can confirm when it comes to us to council. Okay.
I would welcome serving in that capacity, but as I've said umpteen times, I will not serve on a police commission, so.
And that will be part of the business of, we can talk about all this as part of the nomination process as well. I think Vivian had something to say, and then can I?
Yeah, I just have a point of order for you when you're, about the suggestion from the councilman.
Okay, are you okay if?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, okay.
The only thing I'd mention, just I'm keeping track of your issues, and you were very correct to talk about rules and so on, but to accommodate the council member's request, you might want to have a little give in your rule, because unless somebody's already nominated some members of your commission, you will have created a rule that excludes just what she is requesting. And so I would urge some flexibility, and I would urge any member, especially since you haven't started the process, to perhaps think about that, because you're looking at this with something that was just adopted on Monday night, and that's something that was not considered in setting the rule.
Fair enough. I think that's very wise. What I will tell you what I was envisioning. I was envisioning that, and this may not be what anybody else was envisioning, was that anybody on the commission who wanted to be considered for the task force would fill out the questionnaire. But you're right, they did not participate in the first part of the process, so we'll need to be somewhat flexible.
You might want to adjust the timing that accomplishes the mayor's things that are going to come in tomorrow.
Fair enough.
And that might be consistent with that.
All right, so,
Yeah, I nominate myself. I'm not certain who was being referred to, but I nominate myself.
so you're on the, I think you are on the list, okay.
Yeah, okay.
Somebody else actually from the public also nominated you, so you're officially
Yeah,
one of
I
the.
was apprised of that, but thank you.
And I think I can speak for Leslie to say that she would also like to be considered to be on it,
Okay.
so.
But she, all right, so here's what I want to propose in light of that. And just so that we're following rules. I think it makes sense to move the date, and I know this is in complete contradiction with what I said, 5 minutes ago. But I think that we should move the date until, I'm going to propose this Friday, February the 9th. I think that also means we can change it on, if that can be changed in all the places where the notice exists now, to change the deadline from February the 5th to February 9th, to leave room for any human rights commissioners who want to apply, and again, any other member of the general public who has not, who are residents of the city of Ann Arbor and would be eligible to either self-nominate or be nominated. I want to propose that. Any discussion about that?
Mr. Lazarus, would you, or should we have Heather contact the communications department? It needs to be changed on the Human Rights Commission website, probably a blast on the city's.
After I email mayor and council tomorrow morning, I will go talk to the communication staff and have them make the
Do you
change.
want?
I want to make sure.
Okay,
Are others,
thank you.
I guess what I should do is, I will
That's
go ahead
fine.
and move that we extend the date to Friday, February the 9th. Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? All in favor? Oh, did you have,
Not so much that, and it doesn't necessarily have to be part of this motion, but just to have it clearly communicated that we have complete contact information of every applicant, especially in light of the fact that we're going to be forwarding to them the questionnaire, and to ensure that everyone who wants to be considered has the appropriate information, so that when we reach out to them with that questionnaire, all are given the same time frame to respond and be duly considered.
yes, and I think I think we should talk about that in the next portion of this meeting, but I agree with you. Other discussion on my motion? And I know it's been seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, great. And Mr. Lazarus, thank you very much for
Thank you.
I did have that one.
communicating that.
I did have that one.
Yes,
question
okay,
about-
yeah, right. No, I was just talking about in terms of passing along the new deadline to the people who need to put it in all the places that it needs to be put. Vivian?
So as far as task force chair goes, like, I know that we have talked about this a little bit in previous meetings. Like, I wasn't at the meeting on Monday, so I don't know if this was discussed, and I don't think I saw anything in the resolution. But are we imagining that when we give a slate of names to the mayor to give to council, that council will be appointing a chair, that we will be trying to determine who the chair is, or will we let the 11 appoint a chair themselves? Like, are we supposed to be appointing a chair? Will city council do that? Will they do that themselves? Like, what is the process for that?
According to this, the 11 that are going to be nominated shall include one chairperson, and as it's written now, the mayor's nomination will include the chair, as I read it.
I don't see any reason why we, as the Human Rights Commission, couldn't say, and here's who we recommend
As chair.
as chair.
That's-
Yep.
Okay. All right, so I want to make it clear, now that we have extended this deadline, that any one of us who wants to be considered for a position on the task force needs to send, the email, needs to follow the process that we previously established, and have that done by sending it to our email or in some other fashion, whatever is designated in our process, by Friday, February the 9th. Okay? Dwight, you're already a nominee, so you don't have to. But any of the rest of us who want to needs to do that. Okay, anything else on the task force process before we moved into finalizing the questionnaire? Yes, Howard.
I just want to express my appreciation for the diligence that all parties have taken, and I did state this Monday night. The degree of interest and passion people have underscore the significance of the task that the task force is about to embark upon, and subsequently the commission. I do ask, as we continue to go through this process, remember that we all come to this with good intentions, with a desire of having a collaborative process that benefits our community over the long run and further builds mutual respect between the police and the community. This process is always going to have some areas of disagreement, but we're all going to have to be considerate of each other and give ourselves some operating room and space to express those differences. And while, as I said, sometimes emotions get very hot, I think it's important that we all contribute to the process, continuing to emulate that which the council expressed and displayed on Monday, one of professionalism, of passionate but civil discussion, and in the end, coming together on something that benefits our community.
Thank you for saying that. Any other comments before we move along to the questionnaire? So there's a handout in the audience. What I want to say is we have a public comment section of the meeting. It actually came and went. It was supposed to be at the beginning of the meeting. People were supposed to have signed up. I know that one person was signed up who arrived late. Right, and she just raised her hand. What I'm going to do, I'd like to get through the rest of this agenda, and if the commission, then we will discuss as a commission briefly whether or not we can open things up for public comment at the end of the meeting for a few minutes,
Okay.
Since I know we're going to try to do so for the person who signed up and appeared late. Okay? All right. Thank you. All right. I'd like to move on to the questionnaire if there are no objections. Okay, great. Does everybody have a copy of the questionnaire on the commission? All right. So what I'd like to do is, similar to the process of how we review the minutes, I'd like to solicit any changes to the questionnaire. And to be clear, just so that everybody outside knows what we're talking about here, we had in the first phase, if you will, of the process, we solicited interest from the committee of people who are being considered for a seat on the task force. What we want to do is we want to get some more information from the people, from that pool of people who have been nominated or self-nominated, but who are interested in being considered in the form of a questionnaire that we will send out shortly. We will establish a deadline for returning the questionnaire that asks for a little bit more detailed information from them about that will help us make our nominations to the mayor, or our recommendations to the mayor, which will then in turn be turned over to the council. All right, so that's what we're discussing now. Proposed changes to the draft questionnaire.
I, of course, have two, I think. So the second sentence, now that we know what the resolution says, I think we have to change that. I would propose that we write, that it say instead, we, and I would cross out are thrilled to, I would say we have received, I would cross out so we have received many applications and are now faced with the challenge of selecting from this group the much smaller number, instead of who will serve, maybe the much smaller number whom we will recommend to the mayor and council, or something like that. Because we're not
We will
determining
recommend, so replace the phrase
who will
at the end,
serve.
who will serve, with whom we will recommend to the mayor and council.
yeah, recommend for appointment or recommend, whatever, it speaks for itself, I guess. Unless somebody has some better language.
Yeah, and will the mayor, again, does the resolution say that the mayor will be nominating?
Yes.
Right. Whom we will recommend, how about whom we will recommend to the mayor
For no,
for nominating? Okay,
for nominating.
Nomination.
for nomination.
Yeah, that's, I don't know if the people reading that will understand. So, you know, think about who, you know, these are people who want to be on it. It has to be clear to them. So, whom we will recommend to the mayor, and then maybe the mayor will then maybe explain the process here.
Well, maybe we could just say whom we will recommend to the mayor, period.
Right.
And then
The
the
mayor's
resolution
list will
speaks
be-
for itself. Are
I
we
guess we can
concerned,
attach
though?
Well, why not spell out that
Yeah.
the names provided to the mayor will ultimately be provided to
Okay.
to council for final approval or ultimate approval?
And we will recommend to the mayor, period.
Yeah.
And then, I think, Corinne, you are suggesting another sentence.
Right. I guess the names, so,
The people, yeah.
Right.
right, the mayor's final, I guess the mayor is going to cut down that list, so you don't want to make it sound like all names provided to the mayor will all go to council.
Well, actually, the resolution says that all of
Oh.
the names will go to council.
Okay, well then in that case,
Well, how about that, we'll recommend to the mayor and council?
well,
Why do you
council
have to say
ultimately
either?
approves who will be
Why do you have to
appointed.
say you're gonna recommend it to the mayor and council when that's what the resolution says?
Okay.
I mean, it's not like you're gonna recommend it anywhere else, right? I'm not being facetious, I'm,
You mean just whom we will recommend, period?
yeah, end it there, whom we will recommend, period.
That's simple.
Because the resolution already says where it's going and to whom.
And that's right, and we avoid the risk of saying something that's inconsistent with the resolution. We know we're supposed to recommend. I'm actually very comfortable with
That's
that.
fine.
All right.
That's fine.
Less is more, Pam.
Thank you.
I would suggest that we add a sentence advising that the proceedings will not be confidential, or, you know, maybe just the proceedings regarding these questionnaires will be public. Because
Yeah.
I don't think people
That's true.
realize that.
Uh-huh.
I
Yes.
certainly did not.
Yeah.
And they
That's a good
might
idea.
decide to withdraw or
Uh-huh.
choose not to
Sure.
complete this questionnaire.
So a note maybe at the end that says, note, all information provided on this questionnaire will be public? Or
Well,
is
will
it-
I
the
don't-
questionnaires actually be public? I mean,
Our
we're not
Because
going to
we
hand them out.
discussion.
Our
No,
discussion.
well,
But they certainly will be publicly discussed.
Discussed.
could they be subject to FOIA?
Most likely they would
Oh.
be, they could be considered preliminary. I can provide more guidance on that. I will look at that. And I think what, right now, your best bet is to say maybe subject to disclosure under FOIA. Because whether they're preliminary or whether there's other exemptions, I think that the point is that their candidacy and other attributes will be discussed publicly in an open meeting that's televised.
Right.
Okay.
I think we definitely need to talk about what that meeting will look like
Mhm.
at some point. Maybe we
Mhm.
can use initials, I don't know, but that doesn't mean that they could be FOIA ultimately,
That's right.
possibly.
Um,
So, and we can try, but.
All right, so all information provided in response to this questionnaire may be subject to disclosure pursuant to FOIA?
Mm-hmm.
I don't, or maybe publicly discussed, because I think that's the one that's more likely, right? And that's the
Yes.
one that's more,
And subject to.
like,
FOIA.
we'll talk about it in a public meeting. I think that that's the more reasonable fear than like, someone's gonna FOIA all of this.
Yeah,
I
right.
think-
Somebody might.
well,
I mean, that could,
Why not say both?
Yeah.
you could say both, but I think public
Doesn't hurt.
Maybe
subject to
discussed
public
publicly and subject to disclosure pursuant to
Yeah.
FOIA?
Yes.
Yeah.
I would hope that if we do this discussion publicly, and we will have to do that, that we'll use initials or something to protect people and not their names.
Right, that's what I just proposed, that we would have to discuss
Yes.
with the attorney and Lazarus what we can do. But ultimately, the reality is it may be subject to FOIA anyway, even if we take measures, but we will,
But
we
the
can decide
concern
what
is
that
that-
looks like, yes.
That there may very well be some people who don't want their name out there.
Yeah, so-
Right, and I think that we as a commission can agree to use initials, but we also have to make them aware that we wouldn't ultimately control, you know, a FOIA if someone decided to do that.
Okay, so here's how here's how it reads. I'm going to add a final sentence to that first paragraph that says, note, all information provided in response to this questionnaire may be discussed publicly and subject to disclosure pursuant to the Freedom of Information Act. Sound okay?
And I mean, let's not forget, all names go to council once they
Once they
submit
come,
this,
they all
all names.
They're all public.
The names, not,
Right,
The
not just-
recommendations.
yeah.
Just the names, right?
Yeah, not the full,
Not
do
their
the full
information.
questionnaires go to?
No, but the
Okay.
names.
Okay.
I mean,
Oh, yeah,
but they need
no, I
to
think
know.
we said the whole the whole questionnaire.
Probably.
everything.
No,
No,
No?
it said just the names.
I thought, didn't I hear
Right,
someone
not the
say that
questionnaire.
he would want to see all of them?
This is a public process.
Yes.
right, people may not
information
realize
that
if they're
you
not chosen,
submit-
you know, that their name will
People need to be
in front
aware
of
of the
council.
information that they submit may be discussed in the public forum and is potentially subject to disclosure under the Michigan Freedom of Information Act.
Yeah.
And I don't think you parse words with that. It
Yeah.
has to be what it has to be.
Okay.
So
And
they-
that sentence covers both,
Right.
both,
Yeah.
you know, both in our process and also the city council's process too.
Yes.
So David, I got a question.
Uh-huh.
We're going to forward this information to every applicant?
Yes.
Every person who's expressed interest?
Yes.
Is returning the questionnaire a condition for consideration?
I think that it should be.
I'm just asking.
I don't know how others feel.
Okay, so that's question one.
Mhm.
If it's returned and some questions are not answered, are they then not considered?
I think that what, you know, the way that I would handle that is I would take it, you know, we're going to take into account the answers that people provide. If some people choose not to provide answers to one or more questions on the questionnaire, that's something we would take into account. If somebody sent this back with no questions answered, that would likely influence our deliberations about that candidate. So,
Understood. So my final question speaks to one of the questions, number 10. And let's say that one of the applicants, and for the record, I don't know the status of anyone who has applied, but I'm just saying hypothetically. Let's say that one of the persons who has previously expressed interest does have a challenge with question number 10, and they don't want that information publicly known.
I mean, I think that's a choice that they have to make. The
Yeah.
Question 10 reads, just so the record is clear, are you involved in any legal action with the city of Ann Arbor or the Ann Arbor Police Department? Check either yes or no, is the way it's set up, and then if yes, please explain.
So I would recommend then that in your instructions, you tell people that they don't need to answer all questions, but, and then you can decide whether you want to also advise that if not answering a question will somehow make them less attractive as a candidate. You can clean up that language a little bit, but essentially, if your intent is to be inclusive and there are questions that would preclude people who have a strong interest in serving from doing so, then I think it's incumbent upon you to state up front that you don't need to answer all the questions, because people should know that, because otherwise they may get through it and say, I don't want to answer question 10 and not submit. So your good intentions should be stated up front. My recommendation.
Okay. So a sentence like,
Maybe I would propose you could say that something along the lines of, you're not required to answer any question that you're uncomfortable with, but the commission will consider responses as a whole in making its decision.
That's good.
How do people feel about that?
I don't like the but exactly, but maybe just a period.
Or you could change it where you say, commissions ask these questions to make the best decision, but you're not required to answer any question you're not comfortable with. That's a little more positively
Yeah,
stated.
right.
I just think, I think, throughout the process, we've tried to be inclusive,
Yeah.
and I don't think
Yeah.
at this stage where you're making some, you're gonna make a hard choice. You don't want someone to not submit because they're worried about disclosing information. Because remember, as we've gone through this process, it's been pointed out that there's a distrust and fear associated with it, so you want to be considerate of that.
Okay, so we have the last, now the second to last sentence in that paragraph reads, consequently, we are using this questionnaire to collect comparable information from each candidate to enable us to evaluate all applications equitably. And it seems to me that that gets at part of what you're saying. If we add the sentence following it, which says, you are not required to answer any question you are not comfortable answering.
That's fine.
Does that, do we think that that addresses the concern? Okay.
I would add, just, then you're saying not answering it does not disqualify you from consideration.
Okay.
Just to drive the point home.
Okay. I guess I should say a question with an S in parentheses so that they know it's not,
Yeah.
you get to choose one question that you're
Yeah.
not going to answer. Will not disqualify you from consideration. Okay.
I have two more.
Okay, Linda?
I would get rid of in some way in that, what is that, the fourth sentence? Although many of you addressed some of these questions in your original applications in some way, I would just get rid of that.
In some way, okay.
And then we don't have a question, now that we know what the time frame is, from roughly March 19th till, what was it, September 8th? We might want a question that asks people whether they will be available during that time frame to participate in these meetings.
I think that's a good idea. Yeah. So will you, this would be a question 12, I think. Any objection putting it at the end? Will you be available to serve on the task force? Do we say March 19th? I guess,
Well,
from
it
March
won't
through.
happen right then.
Huh?
Yeah, I mean, what do you think, Mr. Lasser?
I think if your desire is to make people aware of the degree of the commitment, it may be helpful to have a statement that says, service on the task force will require 4 to 6 hours per month in the evenings between March and September.
You sure that that's, you think?
I
See, I think it will be up to them maybe to decide how much time it's going to take. You think that you can
Well,
say
if
for
you don't do
certain?
that, then I think when you get back to the subject of making recommendations, you should appoint some alternates, because when you get into the first meeting and we talk about scope and commitment, some people may just say, I can't manage that. And I think that's okay if you want to do it that way. And you can just put a statement in there that that it requires, I don't know what significant means. It's helpful to put some time frame on that. 4 to 8 hours a month.
Or just say monthly for the time frame of March to September.
Yep.
And let them decide.
But
Because
again, I don't, maybe they'll decide to meet every 2 weeks. I mean, you know,
But
we don't
I'm,
know.
so that I'm eliminating the amount of time, but they should meet at least monthly.
I agree with that. I
But it
just,
might be more than monthly, so
More
if you tell
than
them monthly,
monthly,
then we'll
probably.
think.
so it's
I
at least
just,
once a
I'd be
month.
reluctant to put a set time frame because I think it should be up to the group to decide how much time it's going to take them. It may take a lot of time, it may not.
But some have already asked, you know, I'm willing to serve, but what are we talking about on
Yeah,
average or
right.
approximately?
Yeah,
So we want to be able to give them something.
I don't know.
If
I'm
we
not
said
comfortable.
frequently between March and September,
Yeah,
I think that's fine.
I think that's fine. I think we should leave it. I was, when I posed the question, I was thinking, you know, people go away in the summer. That's the summer months. If people go
Is-
away for a month or two in the summer, then
Yeah, does the city have the capacity to provide equipment for people who want to remote in? I'm thinking grad students who might be out of town, people who are out on trips, or like if you have like a high school student who's involved in a program elsewhere, like in the state or in the country, like could we Skype them in or remote them in somehow to these meetings? There's just no capability.
You may be surprised, but that's the first time I've heard that question in the last 20 months. I don't know the answer as to how to handle that. I would think somehow technologically we ought to be able to address it, but I don't have a specific answer.
Because there wouldn't be a requirement that they would need to physically be here, right?
that's true.
I wouldn't think so. I mean, I'm on 5 national calls every month, and I'm not there in person.
The questions that I need to ask internally are, what's the technical capability? What are the requirements that we have as a public entity for remote attendance? So I just ask that you kick that can down the road for a couple of weeks and let me figure it out.
So here's what I have. I'm setting aside the technological question, which I hope can be solved. I propose a question 12 that would read, the task force will meet regularly between March and September.
Okay,
Will you be available to serve on the task force during that time period?
perfect,
How about that?
great.
Okay. Anything else, Lynn? No. Okay. Any other proposed amendments?
Well, I have a question. Number 7, what is the relevance of asking people which ward they're registered to vote in?
So question 7 reads, are you registered to vote in the city of Ann Arbor? And it leaves a space for yes or no. Which ward? And it leaves a blank space to fill in.
Well, I don't think we want to accidentally select only people from one ward, right? It's good to know
Yeah.
that,
Okay, I just didn't, I
you
guess
know.
I just didn't understand
I think that's why.
what was behind the question.
I think it's one factor, and you want to, you know, why,
Make it
Represent-
Well, so there are 2 questions there. One asks, are you registered to vote?
right.
And then the other is, what ward are you in? Does it matter if someone is registered to vote? Do we think that that's
I
relevant?
think there was some, it was, Leslie prepared this questionnaire, so it'd be kind of ironic that she has to answer it too, but, I think she took that from some other city document.
I
Yeah.
recommended, at the time, I recommended she look at what the mayor actually uses for the nominating petition for other boards and commission as a start for some of the questions. And I believe it came from that.
And
Yeah,
what-
so I
why that's
actually-
there, I don't know. Do you know, Mr. Huston?
No, there'd be no requirement for that, and certainly, I think you can just say, I mean, you need to say, are you a resident of Ann Arbor, because
Yeah,
that's
and
one of the
that's
questions.
already there, yeah.
And it would
So-
certainly, related to the student from the neutral zone, may not even be of age to vote, so it'd be irrelevant.
Well, it
So
wouldn't be, first of all, it wouldn't be disqualifying if you weren't. I suppose the question is, do we think it provides us any relevant information that will help us make our decision?
No.
One could argue that somebody who is not registered to vote, it might send a signal that they are not civically engaged at a minimal level that we would find relevant. On the other hand, you know, there are many other ways that someone can be civically engaged without being registered to vote. So I don't
So-
have a strong feeling either way
So
about
I
it.
originally raised this in a question to Leslie when it was included. This is one of the major edits I proposed. I didn't like it,
Yeah.
and she said it was taken from the application for boards and commissions. I didn't remember this question from the original application, because when I applied for this commission, that wasn't a question.
Oh.
I see now that it's part of the questionnaire online, whether or not you are a registered voter. And assuming that it was required, I dropped the issue, but if it's not required and we don't need it, I would prefer it to be left off, because it does tend to slightly, in my mind, discriminate against younger candidates, and also candidates who might not be registered, who are students who are registered to vote in their home districts, or to those of different citizenship statuses too. So I would prefer for that to be left off.
I will look at that, Chair. I will look at that issue, whether it's required, and I will, the administrator certainly could delete that question. I think that given part of this whole task force is dealing with people who are maybe marginalized or otherwise, I suggest that it may send a wrong signal
To leave it in.
to leave it in.
Okay. So here's, okay. Other thoughts about this?
The ward question, people may not know what ward they're in either. Should we ask neighborhood? I mean, is there a way that?
Do we
people-
ask for their address? We don't ask for their
No.
mailing address.
Right,
We have
so.
some addresses, but not all.
We could, well, the question is, do we want to replace that with, just asking them for their address, and then they
Oh, I
don't have
see.
to worry what
Right.
ward they're in?
Or you can leave it in, and if they know, they answer, and if not, you can always try and find the address and then figure out what ward they're in. Because I agree, I think it's just a matter to make sure that you don't have 11 candidates from the first ward.
Yeah.
Or, one area. I wouldn't say if they don't answer it, I would say it's not, your application's out.
It's not
but Yeah, it's not a
disqualifying,
disqualifier. It
Okay.
just helps you to provide more amplifying information to ensure that of the
I think, yeah, I think to the
diversity
extent that
of the
we want to.
candidates are there, so.
Yeah, to the extent that we
it's
want
just to
to
help.
capture some sort of geographic diversity.
Yes.
I still don't know that ward is the best language to do that,
Yeah, we can
because.
just ask for addresses unless you think there's no reason.
What
not
about
to.
address ward if known, to save us time for people who do know? We
You
don't
don't
wanna-
think it's enough just to put the address? We want,
Do you really want to look up 30 wards?
Yeah.
If some people know what ward they're in, it would
Yeah.
save us
Okay, well,
some
whatever you
time.
think.
For people
All
who
right,
don't.
so
like the
here's what I
students.
think we should do. I think we should put both. I think we
Okay.
should have your name, your email or phone, and then right under that,
Your address.
your mailing address.
Okay.
And then I think we should leave the ward question in, and if people don't know, they'll leave it blank. We are saying you don't have to fill it in, but at least it will give us, it's a backup, to enable us to take into account geographic diversity within the city.
But you need
Are
to,
people comfortable with that?
you
Like
need to
language like which
reword
ward
that
if-
somehow.
If
Like,
known,
which ward, I mean,
In which ward do you live?
if known.
people
If
know.
known, that's fine.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think the if known is
Okay.
nicer.
Yeah, okay. So I am going to tentatively cross out, are you registered to vote in the city of Ann Arbor?
Yeah.
And one way or another, I think Mr. Postema will get back to us about whether or not it's a requirement.
I will get back to the administrator, and I will let him do it, because he has a whole list of things to do.
All right, that's great.
So my third question tomorrow is to ask the city attorney.
Right.
Thank you.
In which ward do you live, if known? I'm going to reword that. So that will be all of question 7 if voting is not a
Great.
requirement. Okay, thank you. Other proposed changes?
Well, I guess if we're not going to require people to answer every question, is it necessary to have the word optional at the beginning of question number 4?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Does that help? I think it is.
Okay.
And I put it there for a reason. 'Cause I see that question a lot, and
I think-
I think a lot of people prefer that it be explicitly optional,
Okay.
so.
Even with the additional sentence?
Yeah, people
that
are
says you
not
don't
gonna
have to
read,
answer.
people probably aren't gonna read that, just FYI.
Wait a minute, we
So-
put a lot of time into that
I
paragraph.
understand, and they're gonna skip right to number 1.
Okay. All right, that's fine. Do you have any objection to leaving that in?
That's fine.
Okay, good. Other questions, or other proposed changes, if any?
No.
All right, so here's what I'm going to do. I am going to create an updated document with all of these changes, and I will mail it around. And that way, everybody can make sure that what I have incorporated here in writing is accurate. I guess what I will do is I will, Leslie thought that we should vote on this.
Okay.
So what I am going to ask for is a motion to approve the questionnaire as amended. And then my mailing around will not be for further substantive changes. It'll just be to make sure that I've gotten it correct, okay? So is there such a motion?
Sure, I move that we adopt this questionnaire as amended.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? I didn't vote. I meant to vote aye. All right.
So I do have a question. So we've now extended the deadline till the 9th.
Yes.
We'll have the questionnaire ready to go at that point. So and hopefully we will have heard about any other possible candidates from any other sources by then. So then next week, then, we would send the questionnaire out, say?
Right.
And then what kind of deadline do we want to give them?
I think we should shoot to send it out early next week, so
Right.
say by February the 12th.
Yeah.
And I think it should be due, I would think that almost 2 full weeks. So I'm thinking if we send it out by next Monday, having it back by the 23rd of February. Now, part of that will depend, when are we going to set this meeting to discuss all of these? And I want to, obviously, it will be a lot of material for all of us to review. I want to give us ample time. So is the 23rd, if the meeting were on, say, the 27th or 28th of February, do people think that between the 23rd of February and then would be enough time? I guess I should ask, how much time do people feel that they want to have to review these questionnaires?
I think it's fine.
I think a few days is fine.
Yeah.
Okay. So 1 week, would 1 week, well, I mean, not 1 week for our review. So what do we think about the 23rd as a deadline?
If it goes out the 12th.
If it goes out the.
If it goes out the 12th. All right,
So
so I
should
guess
we-
we should say, what should be the number of days? What window do we want to give people to answer the questionnaire?
I think if our plan is to review them the week of the 26th, that we almost have to say that responses must be received by the 23rd. I don't think
Okay.
we have really any room.
Yeah.
We just
Yeah.
we don't have time to give them more time. And
Right.
that's the minimal amount of time we can,
Yeah.
really review them.
So I'm gonna propose, I guess in light of that, well, and I also, I guess I want to ask for input from people who have been involved in a process like this before. I don't want to hamstring us. I want to give us ample time to review. If we sent it out the 12th and it was due the 21st, that would be 2 days shorter. That would be 9 days. That would likely give us the better part of a week, depending on when we schedule our meeting to review. I'm more comfortable with that, for my part, especially, if we're going to have, enough said. That's what I think. What do people think about that?
Well, the other question I have is, I'd like to give people as much time as possible to answer the questionnaire,
Yeah.
too. So could we meet even the first week of March, or would that be too late?
So your deadline is the 19th. And you need everything back by the, I think it says, does it say in the resolution, or it says somewhere? you
I
want it back
provided,
by the-
I provided a response that the normal course is that the agenda is finalized the Wednesday the week before. Doesn't mean I can't get it added with the sponsor, but it's better to do this as the normal course of business, because getting things out in the public eye as soon as possible is beneficial. So the agenda gets finalized the Wednesday before.
That's the 14th. That means the names need to be finalized, but that means the names need to be finalized not by us. That needs to be finalized by
I need a couple days to write a resolution as
Right.
well, so I would ask that you do it the Friday before that.
All right, so that would be by March the 9th.
A question, would Mr. Postma have any input just on
Yeah.
dealing with the Open Meetings Act? And
You know, what I heard your earlier question about having about 30 and, between 30 and 40, it's less of an Open Meetings Act issue, but it may address the concerns that you had about going through all of the applications at your next special meeting or public meeting. You could easily delegate to one person to look at these and bring back, say, a 20 that would come, a slate of 20 that somebody's culled through very carefully. And that would be the discussion with the option that anybody, if you've read all of them, could bring, you know, maybe they missed one but that might narrow it down. You could also have a subcommittee that could meet. That meeting would not be televised. It would be probably posted. Unlikely that it would, again, have a lot of people there or meet, but you could.
So it wouldn't have to be televised, but it would still have to be public.
It would have to be public,
Uh-huh.
but in that case, you could nominate one or two or three to a subcommittee and post that, have people go through the nitty-gritty of it, and then come back with the same thing. We think that for the purpose of our meeting, it might be 20 to look at. Not that anybody else couldn't add one, but it would be a way to bring some narrowing that would not be inappropriate for something like this.
Mhm.
But how much notice do we have to provide for a full off-schedule meeting if we decide to do that to the public?
A special meeting of your group?
Yes.
You would have to, I'd suggest that
Because right
you
now, we're not.
set that meeting tonight. A special
Right.
meeting ordinarily, under the Open Meeting Act, would usually be 18 hours.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Okay, so that's
So
not
it's not
bad. Yeah, okay.
The constraining factor is most likely how many people are going to meet and the size of the room that you need.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah, so,
So the 9th, if we waited, I think the first week in March would be March the 5th, right? I also think, you know, there's some possibility, even whether we winnow it down or not, that, you know, I don't know whether we'll finish this in one sitting.
okay.
So I think we should be shooting for the week of the
Okay.
26th. What do people think? Okay.
I agree. And then I have a question. How are we actually sending this questionnaire?
I guess, so since Leslie's not here, I've been managing the HRC email, and I suppose I'll use her method of just, we have now the list of the candidates. We may be adding to them. I'll just send it by email, because mostly, we don't have everybody's mailing address. We do have everybody's email.
Do we have everyone's email who expressed interest?
We have everybody's email who has either nominated themselves or been nominated and confirmed that they want to be considered. Those are our candidates.
Okay. So, again, dates, knowing that this is going to be the week of the 26th sometime, hopefully, when do we think, do we want to go back to the 23rd as the date to give people as much time as possible to answer?
Sure.
All right.
And maybe we can make it a little later in the week of February.
Right. Questionnaire due on 2/23, 11:59 p.m. Bye. All right. So the week of the 26th.
I have serious restraints in.
Do you?
Yeah, from the 23rd until March 1st, I'm going to be in San Diego. One of my oldest grandson is going to be in a Shakespearean play, and his granddaddy is going to be there watching him.
So to combat that concern that Mr. Wilson has, I would ask you to consider whether or not someone who is wishing to be considered for as part of the recommendation, be
Good point.
recused from the selection.
That makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah, we know.
That way, you don't have to have a cloud hanging over your joy while you're in San Diego.
No,
I think-
we don't like clouds on joy,
No, I think it all depends on what play you're going to see.
as you like it.
Okay, that's, you should definitely be recused then. Okay. All right, so if people have calendars handy, and I know this is subject to room availability.
Could we not meet in the workroom?
Yeah,
That's where we used to meet.
yeah, why don't we get a date and a time, and then we'll see if the workroom is available.
We won't televise that.
It would
I
have-
know.
by
Yeah.
telephone.
Okay.
It has to be televised if it's a full group.
Why does it have to be? For years, we weren't. It
Because
was
we're
still
under
have a
scrutiny.
meeting.
So I think that, oh, I'm sorry.
Did
Okay.
you want to ask why it had to be televised?
I think that that's been some direction, that's my understanding of it.
Okay.
And so
Okay.
a special meeting, just like the council special meetings are at
Okay.
this location.
Okay.
So it sounds like
We
there's a
can.
potential you said, council working meeting on the 26th, Mr. Lazarus?
I've, it's tentative, the date's tentatively reserved. I don't think the council's going to meet.
Should we try for the
But I
Wednesday?
can't commit to that until they
since
tell me
we're-
they don't want to meet.
That's early for us anyway. If we don't do it on the 26th, it gives us
It's-
more
right,
independent
right.
time to review.
Okay.
How about more like the 28th, since we typically meet on Wednesdays
Sure.
anyway?
Are people available on the 28th?
Works for me.
Yes.
Let me also ask, just as a backup, in case we have a room problem, are people available on the 1st?
Yes. No,
Is anybody not?
I'm not.
You're not, okay. Though I shudder to recommend it,
Friday
are
night.
people available on Friday the 2nd?
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
Anybody not available on Friday the 2nd? All right, so why don't we have our first choice be February the 28th at 7 PM, and have our second choice be March the 1st at 7 PM. Is the building available on a Friday at 7 PM if we,
Probably.
right, it's not going to be packed, is
We
it?
could, we could potentially meet earlier. I don't know if people are
Oh, on
available.
Friday? On a
Like
Friday
6 or
afternoon?
something,
I wouldn't object to a 6 o'clock meeting on Friday.
Yeah.
That's on
Are you
Friday
able to
the
get
2nd.
back from Lansing by then?
Depends.
Okay.
It'd be harder for me, but I could just come straight here.
Oh, we certainly don't want to hamstring you. If you think 7 is safer, then we should do 7.
6:30.
6:30?
Okay.
All right, so that's our second choice. All right, and the goal is to finish and get Mr. Lazarus what he needs by March the 9th.
And what about a potential
A
subcommittee?
potential subcommittee. Right.
How do people feel about that?
I actually think it's a good idea. I actually feel comfortable with some subgroup of us.
Although, as I think about it, if Dwight and possibly Leslie are out of it, that just leaves us with, how many? 5 of us?
1, 2,
6 of
3,
us.
4, 5, 6.
6, which isn't a very large group anyway.
Two subcommittees.
Yeah, the question is,
Televised or
you know,
not.
whether, yeah, and I think that, you know, if we are organized, then, and people come to the meeting really prepared,
Mhm.
you know, that should be okay. I say that now, and we're gonna have 35 of these things to review, and I may regret it, but, I don't know. I actually am comfortable with the subcommittee too. What do other people think?
I guess my other question is it kosher for people to somehow rank on paper ahead of time? And so some of it can be.
Oh, sure. I mean, I would expect that in something like this, you would all sort of rank people in order of what you, or even having groups, you know, because you might have people who have similar backgrounds or interest in peace and justice issues or, you know, certain social work skills or whatever. So there might be groups of similarly situated people that you might want to include, so sure.
And the other benefit of a subcommittee is they could meet with the city attorney and Lazarus on what that meeting, that special session looks like so that we get through it efficiently. So I think that's another benefit.
Does a subcommittee have to be a sub-quorum number?
The subcommittee could be any, because it would be then posted under the council directive that subcommittees of commissions follow the Open Meetings Act. What really would be required is just a posting of that, so there would be no limitation, but certainly 2 or 3 people could very efficiently go through the whole group and put them in some order and bring some recommendations back.
As I think about it, that sounds very appealing to me. How do other people feel?
I think you could chair that subcommittee.
You
It's
think
very
I could?
appealing to me.
So then we need another date, and who else would want to be on it?
I'd want to be on it.
I would want to be on
I'm happy to, but I don't have to be.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I know you've just nominated me to chair the subcommittee.
Co-chair.
Us.
I don't know.
Or co-chair. Maybe there's no chair needed.
Yeah. I mean, if you're looking for volunteers,
Yeah.
2 of us.
Pam and
that's fine.
Vivian are both interested. Anybody else? Dwight is out of the mix.
Yeah, I'll do it.
Oh, you might as well all meet me.
Yeah, no, it's like,
I was thinking along the lines, without trying to dictate what governs, that we should list every applicant alphabetically and list if they also return the questionnaire,
Yes.
and maybe list what they say they bring to the table, like if they're retired, if they're, you know, in education, if they're, whatever their discipline is. And that becomes our foundation. And then we determine any subsequent things that we want, like, you know, if they're male or female, if we know, or trans. So, you know, we can, because at some point, we're going to want to report this out. So we can say we received X number of candidates. Of those, we submitted, you know, sent them all a questionnaire. We received, you know, all the questionnaires back returned, or whatever, you know. And then from there, since we have the ward question on there, we can say we have representatives from every ward or only whatever. Because that becomes the basis of what we're going to use to make any recommendations.
Well, just to be clear, these 3 people wouldn't be the deciders, right?
No, it's
Okay.
just so that when we meet initially on the 28th, we know what we're starting with.
Okay.
So we know we've got
Yeah,
whatever the number is, they got the questionnaire in, we have, you know, 15 men and 15
Yeah,
women,
okay.
or, you know,
Yeah.
whatever.
Right. The subcommittee can put together a nice summarizing spreadsheet
Okay.
with
Mhm.
important
Okay.
factors.
No, I think that's right. You mean that's what the subcommittee will do for the committee, or for the commission at large?
And for ourselves.
Yeah.
So that we know what we're working with.
So obviously, your meeting is going to have to take place sometime between the 23rd and the 28th.
Well, we'll have to have the information between then.
Yeah, right, well, no, I
Well, we
mean,
will, you know, I'm sure we'll come in bit by bit, and whoever wants to chair the subcommittee, you know, either you can be checking the HRC email and the mailbox, or I can forward it, or whatever, or just let you know it's there.
and I'm going to let you, I think you all get to decide on the date amongst yourselves, what works for the 3 of you. I don't know, do you agree that we don't have to discuss that here?
Yes.
Okay. All right. All right, so
Great.
I think that we
There's
have done it now.
There's an issue.
Um,
Oh,
David?
Yes, oh, I'm sorry, Graydon.
Just one point of order.
Or
I think
Steve.
that if you are appointed a subcommittee you should just take a vote on that and appoint those members and indicate that they will set a time through the, through the administrator to post a meeting that when they get together, that they will post the meeting properly under the Open Meetings Act.
Do I hear a motion? All right, so I move that we nominate Rick, Pam, and Vivian to serve as a subcommittee to look preliminarily at the questionnaires in order to prepare for the full committee meeting on the 28th, and that they work with the city administrator to schedule a meeting. Does that cover everything? Okay, that's my motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Discussion?
Wait, so to set a meeting, so the three of us and the city administrator?
No, you're just working with Mr. Lazarus, I think, to set a date. He's not going to serve on the subcommittee.
You know,
Okay.
typically, we do it through Heather. I hate to give Mr. Lazarus all.
Yeah, I don't know
You
that.
know, it doesn't really happen.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can
the
just
staff.
contact Heather to get a room
Right.
and make sure she posts it.
So I'm going to change my motion to coordinate with the appropriate city administrator.
Vice President,
City staff member. Right, sorry about that.
why don't you just call it the commission liaison?
The commission liaison. All right, that's my motion. And is there a second to that?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, great. It is 9:40 PM. I would like to propose, I'm trying to remember if there was anything time-sensitive about one community. I don't think there is. I would like to propose that we table our discussion of one community advancing racial equity in Ann Arbor and Washington County to the March meeting. Is there any objection to that?
No.
Okay, I don't think we have to vote on that. All right, so I'm also going to propose that we, let me just ask, are there any commissioner communications?
No.
Okay. We did not have public comment. It looks like there was at least one person who signed up for public comment. Is there any objection to moving public comment now to right now and have the person who signed up, and I don't know whether you signed up, I don't know your name in the blue coat, or if you still have a comment to make. You do, right, Lori did, okay. Lori, if you'd like to come forward and make your comment, now would be the time.
Thanks
Thank
for your
you.
patience.
Yes.
Hi, y'all.
Hi.
So I'm going to speak on behalf of Transforming Justice Washtenaw. I'm Lori Saginaw, and start out by thanking the Human Rights Commission for your work advocating so long for police oversight in Ann Arbor. In particular, thank you to Dwight Wilson. Dwight Adams is a trumpet player, for many hours of research and advocacy. When the majority rule and the minority seek mercy, justice sometimes becomes elusive. These were Dwight's words to council on Monday, and they call us to continuous action. We are here to reaffirm our commitment to working with everyone to achieve meaningful community policing review, and to reiterate a few comments that we made Monday about power differentials and transparency. Law enforcement holds significant power on two levels. Interpersonally, there's an inherent imbalance of power when one person carries lethal weapons and has the ability to administer a trespass charge, while the other holds neither of these privileges. And I might add that power differential can exist when that is a past experience that someone has had. Systemically, we know police departments across the country do abuse their power. And as Mayor Taylor said, Ann Arbor is America. So police abuse of power causes significant community distrust, and this is why every step of oversight process must be transparent, as you have spoken to tonight. So it's of concern to us that the criteria by which the mayor will appoint a chair, for example, remains unclear. And we highlight this because opaqueness at any point in the process erodes community trust. We speak and represent for a widespread concern in this community about Black adults and youth, Latinx adult and youth, trans adults and youth, and those formerly involved with the police who find it difficult to speak out freely and honestly to bodies of power. So we are committed to creating a task force with you in which none of our neighbors are fearful to speak out and engage in this process. And I respect and appreciate what I've witnessed tonight in your work on the questionnaire, with all the nuances that a question can have on the whole spectrum of individuals that we want to be represented. We do appreciate City Council's affirmative vote on the 2 amendments, and we particularly appreciate Council Member Eaton and Sumi. However, we have 2 serious concerns. One is the power for a review board to independently review police incidents was not approved, and it was left to the task force for a recommendation. Let's see, where are my edits? The mayor does not support the need for a police review board that can independently examine incidents of alleged police misconduct. We know that the ACLU guidelines on police review state full investigatory powers as necessary, and that these powers have proven to work efficiently and effectively. We will continue to engage with the mayor and city council to create a path forward where police are not responsible for their own oversight. And we're hopeful that Ann Arbor's anti-racist words, and words do have meaning, will be matched with anti-racist actions and anti-racist policies and basic democratic checks and balances. We're very heartened to see, after tremendous outpouring from the community, the mayor is taking steps toward creating a long-awaited real police review. We want to believe that his words have meaning. There is a distance to go, so we will hold him accountable to choose actions that reflect his words at every step of the way. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Did the young lady want to?
Ms. Beckley, would you like to speak?
Yes, I will. But I want to take this opportunity to thank all of you. It's been a long battle, and I do appreciate all that you've done, and I appreciate putting up with me, as I have put up with you. I want you to know, I really think it's a big step, and I hope we can show other cities and other states just really how great Ann Arbor can be. I know we have the potential. I've lived here long enough and seen it at one time, so I think we can bring it back. So I just want to tell you, I really appreciate all this. And I'm not saying this because I want to be on, I don't care if I get on the task force or not. I will always be in the background saying what I got to say. So it doesn't matter really to me. I'm just glad that we've taken this step. And I really do, in all honesty, appreciate all that you've put in. Really, you've put in and you've taken a lot. But you got some more work to do.
Thank
And
you.
we can do it, and hopefully we can do it together.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, madam.
Did the young lady, did you want to speak? No. Oh, okay.
All right. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll move to adjourn.
We have co-motions by Pam and Netta. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks, David.
You.